also, I recall a time when there was a small group of mostly white faculty and some of the more active black students who were talking about various things. Because I think at that time, probably the black population was 4%, 5%, something pretty small. And I remember one of the things we talked about is having a Black Studies program. And they were just really being started around the country. And I remember in about '69 or so, a delegation of us went to see the Chancellor. And we said, well, we think a Black Studies program would really be really important, and we kind of laid out all the argument. And I remember he looked at us and he said, what's that? Is there really enough in the coursework to really have courses and this kind of thing? And of course now it's kind of taken for granted that Black Studies is a scholarly discipline. But only a fairly short time ago that really wasn't the case. And so I think while you know, I taught race relations and I'm very critical of a lot of things that are going on now. But it's also important to see how far we've come. I mean, and again, people like Larry and the blacks who were fighting for their own rights. That's really important to always remember that.
I have a question. Do you think in our lifetime will discrimination ever come to an end with it? You know, there will be no discrimination.
No. Particularly in the United States, because we have such a racialized society, and it's really part of the culture as well as the rest of the social structure. But again, when you think of the 1950s and in the past, I mean, it was legal. You know, there weren't laws against it. Mm-hmm. So now there are laws. They're not perfectly perfect, and there's still a lot of discrimination that goes on. It's more difficult to do, and there are penalties when you get caught. And that's just a really different kind of a situation than existed in the past when it was legal to do that. It was legal constitutionally. Hopefully things will continue to improve, but what Larry mentioned before about the economy, I think is really important. Mm-hmm. Because when you have an economy like we have now, everybody is at everybody else's throats. Everybody is scared. Mm-hmm. With reason. I mean, it's not really irrational. The problem is, with our history and culture, some of that fear becomes racialized. And so, you know, white workers might see black workers as the enemy, or Hispanic workers or immigrants or what have you, and not think of the businesses that are employing people like that as the enemy. So I think we're going to have problems for a good while. And hopefully people will become educated and more knowledgeable about what's going on. And I don't mean that they have to go to college to do that. And that they'll be organizing. I was, just as an example, I guess last year, I was absolutely thrilled about the whole Occupy Baltimore and Occupy movement, even though it didn't zero in on racial issues all that much, but there was this mass outpouring, mm-hmm. and hopefully more of that will happen, and the issues will be broader.
I just want to add this. I happen to agree with what Fred's main answer, which was, in effect, you never do away with prejudice and discrimination. However, I know how it was when I was growing up. And I know the language that whites used among themselves and in public to describe blacks. And I also see what's happening with white children and my grandchildren. And there's a world of difference. It's so much better now than it used to be. And I hope that improvement continues.
Helene?
Just an add to that, where before there was a lot of discrimination and it was institutionalized that you could do it. I mean, there were laws you can't use in communities, you can't use this restroom if you're this color and so on and so forth. And now the opposite, the institutionalization of laws that say you can't do this, that, and it has a whole different continuity.
Okay, I think we're going to close now. Oh, somebody else? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I would like to say this. On one side of the family, I'm a first-generation American, and I would like to say that discrimination and a loss of rights definitely will influence many people as to whether they're willing to give those rights to someone who doesn't necessarily have them. For example, it also depends what the ideals are of the person who came into the country. My father, for example, he came from the Holocaust, but he came as a 13-year-old. He was scared to death. First of all, he has a German name, German accent. Never mind, he's Jewish. He's afraid they were going to really get him. So he learns English as fast as he can, gets rid of his accent as fast as he can, comes to maturity, and yes, he's willing to take a risk and hire African Americans. He hired the first African American in his government agency at the time to work in Washington. And the reaction of the people around him in his office, it was a risk for him, in that they all threatened to quit. They're all leaving, this and that. They don't want to talk to the new person. But my father was only interested in if this person was qualified to do the work or not. And he found this man to be brilliant. He said within about 48 hours, everyone, yes, they decided to accept this person to work there. And it was a happy ending, luckily, and that they all ended up, talking to one another as far as the job was concerned, and the atmosphere of work was concerned. And I have another thing to say, is that anytime you have any situation of discrimination, of mass killings for who you are, you're always going to think twice about the other human being, the other ethnic group, nationality, or whatever, and what's going on with them. So that happened with most of the individuals that my father knew, and most of my friends I didn't grow up in Baltimore. I grew up in Silver Spring, and I was born in Washington, D.C. So at that time, we did listen to what was going on TV. And I admire to this day Martin Luther King Jr., and I'm always willing to listen to his speeches. I'm always fascinated by them. So I think that there is always room for an exchange between individuals, and that if someone really wants to set it up, it can be done.
Thank you. That last issue triggered a memory for me. In our Chavurah, our community, we had a discussion among the members about 2 years ago about what does it mean to you to be Jewish in a majority Christian society, or what has it meant in your life. And without exception, every person in the group who was in their 70s and 80s had suffered employment or housing discrimination, or both. Those of us who were baby boomers had not gone through that experience. Maybe we had heard, derogatory words used now and then about Jews, or, I remember a couple of us talked about the pressure of singing Christmas songs in our school assemblies, that kind of thing, which is like nothing compared to housing and employment discrimination. And we've heard others talk about how far we've come since the 50s and 60s. So in answer to the lady's question in the back, hopefully these progressions will continue. And while I think we all agree that discrimination is not going to disappear, hopefully we'll see continual declines in that. Fred?
I think it's important to realize that just because a group is different, it doesn't mean they're necessarily discriminated against. That there's places in countries in the world where race is just not an issue. Religion might be an issue, but not race. But there's a difference between what, if I could just be academic for a moment, what sometimes is called the other, that is groups that are culturally stigmatized in a particular society, who are different, but they're seen as negative. And there's other groups that are different that are just different. So I think it's not just the physical differences that are about racial discrimination, but it's really how they're defined culturally and where people are at in the differences in society. That's the real issue.
Okay, I think we're going to end it now. Please feel free to stick around for refreshments and socializing. Like I say, we have the room for up to 4:30. And thank you very much for coming. Thanks so much to our speakers.